Feel the cold air, hear the distant rumble, and prepare for a journey into the unseen underbelly of New York City's subway system. Join us as we pull back the curtain on the bizarre rules and chilling encounters faced by the brave few who patrol its depths, guarding secrets you never knew existed. The last train pulled out of 42nd Street Station at 2:47 a.m., its taillights disappearing into the tunnel like red eyes blinking closed. Detective James Holloway stood on the platform, watching the darkness swallow the train whole. In 17 minutes, the station would be completely silent. In 20, he'd descend the maintenance stairwell that led deeper than any passenger had ever gone. In 30, he'd begin his patrol through 147 miles of tunnel that wound beneath Manhattan like arteries beneath skin. James wasn't a police detective, though people often made that assumption when he introduced himself. His badge read, Transit Authority Special Operations, a department so obscure that even most MTA employees didn't know existed. He preferred it that way. The less people knew about what happened in the deep tunnels after midnight, the better they slept. He checked his watch. 3:04 a.m. Time to go down. The maintenance stairwell descended past the passenger platforms, past the visible track level, down to what the old-timers called the real subway. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in the first 100 steps. By the time James reached the lower access tunnel, his breath formed clouds in the beam of his flashlight. The walls here were different. Older brick, some of it dating back to the original 1900 for construction, covered in a black film that wasn't quite soot and wasn't quite mold. Nobody seemed to know what it actually was. His radio crackled. Holloway, you copy? Copy dispatch. Entering Tunnel 7, Northern Route. Roger that. Chin's running the Southern Loop tonight. Thompson called in sick. James felt his jaw tighten. Thompson was the third patrolman to call in sick this month, and sick was often code for, I can't do this anymore. The turnover rate in special operations was astronomical. Most recruits lasted less than 6 months before requesting transfers. James had been walking these tunnels for 4 years, which made him practically a veteran. The tunnel stretched ahead, illuminated every 100 feet by maintenance lights that barely pushed back the darkness. The concrete beneath his boots was perpetually damp despite the lack of visible water. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned. The sound of the infrastructure settling or expanding or doing whatever it was that made the subway system seem alive after dark. He passed the first marker, a yellow stripe painted on the wall with the number 7, and one stenciled in black. Every marker represented a half-mile checkpoint. By dawn, he needed to have reached marker 7 in 24 and back again. 12 miles through passages that smelled of electricity and earth and something else, something organic that shouldn't exist this far underground. At marker 7, in 3, James noticed a graffiti. That was new. Someone had spray painted a message in red that dripped down the wall like blood. They know you're coming. The letters were crude, painted in haste, but the message sent ice through his veins. Graffiti wasn't supposed to exist down here. It was impossible. The access points were locked, monitored, restricted to authorized personnel only. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, I've got unauthorized markings at 7 in 3. Recent application, still wet. The response took longer than it should have. Noted. Continue patrol. Should I report to? Continue patrol. Holloway. The radio went silent. James stared at the message for another 30 seconds, then moved on. This was part of the job. Things that didn't make sense, questions that didn't get answered, and the understanding that some mysteries were better left alone. But what happened next would make him question everything. At marker 7, in 5, the tunnel branched. The main passage continued straight, well-lit and familiar. The left branch led to an older section, partially collapsed in the 1960s and supposedly sealed off. The right branch. James had never taken a right branch. In 4 years of patrols, he'd been explicitly instructed to avoid it. No explanation given. Just a red line on the map marked restricted. Tonight, there was light coming from the right branch. Not the yellow glow of maintenance lights, but something else. Something that flickered and danced like firelight, casting shadows that moved with unsettling rhythm against the tunnel walls. James's training told him to radio it in immediately. His instinct told him to run. He did neither. Instead, he approached the junction slowly, his flashlight held steady, his other hand resting on the batten at his hip. The flickering light grew brighter as he neared the entrance to the restricted tunnel. He could hear something now, a sound like whispering, or perhaps water moving over rocks, or maybe something else entirely. The sound seemed to shift every time he tried to focus on it. He stood at the threshold of the right tunnel, peering into its depths. The light source was approximately 50 feet in, around a bend in the passage. The walls here were different, older still, constructed of stone blocks that predated the subway system entirely. They'd built the modern tunnels around something ancient, something that had been there long before the first train ever ran. "Hello," James called out, immediately regretting it. His voice echoed wrong in this space, coming back distorted, layered over itself, until it sounded like a dozen people responding at once. The flickering light went out. James stood in absolute darkness, his flashlight suddenly feeling inadequate in his hand. The whispering sound continued, growing louder, more distinct. He could almost make out words now, syllables in a language he didn't recognize, delivered in a cadence that made his teeth ache. Then, from deep within the restricted tunnel, came footsteps, not the quick, purposeful stride of another patrolman. These were slow, deliberate, each one followed by a dragging sound, as if something was being pulled behind a walker. The footsteps grew closer, echoing off the stone walls, and with them came a smell, sulfur and copper and decay. James backed away from the tunnel entrance, his heart hammering against his ribs. The footsteps continued, closer now, almost to the junction. His radio crackled with static. Then a voice broke through, distorted almost beyond recognition. "Holloway, I'm at 7 in 5, he whispered into the radio, unable to tear his eyes from the dark tunnel entrance. "There's something. Get out of there." The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. James could feel something watching him from the darkness, could sense its attention like pressure against his skin. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs felt rooted to the concrete. Then, from the restricted tunnel, someone spoke. The voice was clear, close, almost conversational. "You're late tonight, James." The voice knew his name. The voice that came from a tunnel that had supposedly been sealed for 60 years knew his name. James ran. He didn't care about protocol or proper procedure or what dispatch would say. He ran back the way he'd come, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the walls, his boots pounding against concrete that suddenly felt less solid than it should. Behind him, the footsteps resumed, matching his pace exactly, always maintaining the same distance no matter how fast he moved. He reached marker 7, in 3. The graffiti had changed. The message now read, "You can't leave." He kept running, past marker 7 and 1, up the maintenance stairwell, taking steps 3 at a time, his lungs burning, his radio screaming static. He didn't stop until he burst through the door at the top, stumbling onto the passenger platform of 42nd Street Station. The first morning trains were arriving. Commuters filed past him, checking their phones, sipping coffee, completely unaware of what existed beneath their feet. James leaned against the tiled wall, gasping for breath, his hands shaking. His radio crackled one final time, the voice now clear and calm. "Holloway, report to headquarters immediately. We need to discuss the rules." The headquarters of Transit Authority Special Operations occupied a converted maintenance facility near the South Ferry Terminal. From the outside, it looked abandoned, rusted gates, peeling paint, windows covered with decades of grime. Inside was different. Inside was where they kept the records of everything that happened below. James sat in a windowless conference room, still wearing his patrol gear, still smelling of tunnel air and fear. Across from him sat Director Patricia Vaughn, a woman in her 60s who'd spent 40 years in the subway system. Her face was carved with lines that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. She slid a leather-bound notebook across the table. "Open it," she said. James did. The first page was handwritten in ink that had faded to brown. Rules for Night Patrol Operations. Updated January 1947. "This is the real manual," Vaughn continued. "Not the one they give you in training. Not the official MTA guidelines. This is what keeps patrolmen alive down there." James flipped through the pages. There were dozens of rules, some crossed out, some added in different handwritings spanning decades. Some made sense. Others didn't make sense at all. Rule 1. Vaughn said, though James could read it himself. Never patrol alone below the 3rd level. "I patrol alone every night," James said, "because you're still above the 3rd level. The tunnels you walk are deep, but not that deep. The 3rd level." Vaughn paused, choosing her words carefully. "The 3rd level is where the city's original infrastructure meets something older. Pre-colonial. We don't send anyone down there anymore. Not since 1983. "What happened in 1983? Vaughn's expression suggested he didn't want to know. She pointed to the next rule. Rule 7. If you encounter graffiti in a sealed section, do not read it aloud. Do not attempt to decipher it. Report and move on. James thought of the red message he'd seen. They know you're coming. He'd read it. He'd absorbed it. Was that why the voice had known his name? Rule 12, Vaughn continued, is the most important one for what you experienced tonight. She flipped the pages to a section near the middle. The text was underlined 3 times. Never, under any circumstances, enter the red-marked tunnels between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. If you see light or hear sounds coming from these passages, move away immediately. Do not investigate. Do not respond to voices. Do not acknowledge anything you might see. I didn't enter it, James said quietly, but I got close. Too close. The fact that you heard a voice, that it spoke your name. Vaughn rubbed her temples. That's problematic. What's in those tunnels? We don't know. Not exactly. Vaughn pulled out a folder thick with yellow documents. The subway system wasn't built on empty land, Holloway. There were things here before, indigenous burial sites, colonial-era wells, structures we can't identify. When they excavated for the first lines in 1900, workers reported incidents, tools going missing, men disappearing, sounds that shouldn't exist underground. She spread several black and white photographs across the table. They showed construction crews from the early 1900s, men with pickaxes and shovels, standing in partially dug tunnels. But in the background of each photo, barely visible in the darkness, were shapes. Human-like but wrong somehow, too tall or too thin or standing at angles that defied physics. They built the subway anyway, Vaughn said. Sealed off the areas that were too problematic. Created buffer zones. Implemented rules. For 100 years, we've maintained an understanding with whatever shares this space with us. An understanding. We stay in our sections. They stay in theirs. We follow the rules. They usually leave us alone. Vaughn's eyes met his. Usually. James felt his skin crawl. So what's changed? Why did something speak to me tonight? That's what I need you to tell me. Have you broken any protocols recently? Deviated from your assigned route? Acknowledged anything unusual? James thought back over his recent patrols. 3 nights ago, he'd heard singing coming from a maintenance shaft. Beautiful, haunting music that seemed to call to him. He'd stopped, listened for several minutes before moving on. 2 weeks before that, he'd found a child's doll sitting in the middle of the tracks, pristine and clean despite the filth around it. He'd reported it, but also, he'd picked it up, examined it. The doll had been warm. I might have, he admitted. Vaughn sighed deeply. Then they've noticed you. Once they notice you, the rules become harder to follow. They'll test you, try to lure you deeper, make you break protocol. We've lost good people that way. Lost them how? Some quit, some transfer, some. She pulled out another document, this one stamped with red letters. Missing person report. Some just don't come back up. James stared at the report. The photo showed a man in his 30s. Same special operations uniform James wore. The name read, Daniel Thompson. Thompson, the patrolman who'd called in sick tonight. He didn't call in sick, did he? No, Vaughn said softly. Thompson entered the red-marked tunnel 3 nights ago. We pulled his body out at dawn. He'd aged 40 years in 6 hours. Heart attack. But his eyes. She stopped, swallowed hard. His eyes had changed. Different color. And he was smiling. Even dead, he was smiling. The room felt smaller suddenly. The walls closer. James wanted to quit right then. Wanted to walk out and never think about the subway again. But Vaughn wasn't finished. There are other rules you need to know. Rule 18. If you see other patrolmen who aren't on the schedule, do not engage them. They aren't what they appear to be. She flipped pages. Rule 23. The ghost trains are real. They run on no schedule, stopping at no stations. If you see one coming, flatten yourself against the wall and don't breathe until it passes. Ghost trains. Maintenance cars, theoretically. Unmanned vehicles running automated routes. Theoretically. Vaughn's tone suggested otherwise. In practice, there's something else. Old rolling stock from the 1920s and 30s that should be in museums or scrapyards. But they still run. Passengers visible in the windows sometimes, dressed in period clothing, looking out at the tunnels with empty eyes. James had never seen a ghost train, but he'd heard other patrolmen talk about them in whispered conversations. Stories of subway cars covered in rust and decay, moving at impossible speeds, the screech of metal on metal echoing for miles. Rule 31, Vaughn continued, deals with the tunnel dwellers. The homeless who've made the deep tunnels their home. Most are harmless, avoiding contact with authorities. But some have been down there so long they've changed. Adapted. Become something else. You'll know them by their eyes. They reflect light like an animal's. If you encounter one, back away slowly. Never turn your back. The rules continued, each stranger than the last. Rule 42. If all your lights fail simultaneously, count to 60 before activating backup illumination. Give them time to return to the darkness. Rule 57. Track fires are common. Track fires that burn blue are not. Do not attempt to extinguish blue fires. Rule 63. You may hear your name called from empty tunnels. You may hear familiar voices. You may even hear dispatch giving you orders. Always verify via standard radio protocols. What mimics down there has learned our procedures. How many rules are there? James asked, his voice hollow. 87 currently. We add more as we learn. We remove ones that stop working. Vaughn closed the notebook. The rules aren't perfect, Holloway. They're just what we've figured out keeps us alive. Follow them exactly, question nothing, and you might survive your contract. And if I want to quit, you can, but you'll need to undergo debriefing first. Psychological evaluation. Standard exit procedures. Vaughn's expression softened slightly. I won't lie to you. Leaving isn't easy. What you've seen, what you know now, it stays with you. Thompson tried to quit last month. We were processing his exit paperwork when he went back down. Said he heard something calling him. Why would he go back? That's the thing about the deep tunnels, Vaughn said quietly. After a while, they get inside you. Part of you stays down there, even when you're up here. And part of what's down there comes up with you. She stood, gathering the documents. You're scheduled for another patrol tomorrow night. Southern route this time. Stay in the mapped sections. Follow the rules. Don't listen to the voices. And if I hear my name again. Vaughn paused at the door. Rule 74. If something knows your real name, give it a false one. Tell it you're someone else. Maybe it will lose interest. She left James alone in the conference room with a leather-bound notebook. He opened it again, reading through rules that spoke of things that shouldn't exist beneath a modern city. His eyes caught on one near the end, added in recent handwriting. Rule 86. If you see yourself in the tunnels, run. Do not make eye contact with your double. Do not let it touch you. If it speaks, cover your ears. What wears your face is not your friend. James closed the notebook and tried to stop his hands from shaking. Leonard Shun had worked the southern tunnels for 11 years, longer than any active patrolman in special operations. He agreed to meet James at a diner on Canal Street at noon, a place with harsh fluorescent lights and the constant clatter of dishes, sounds that kept the tunnel silence at bay. They told you about the rules, Leonard said, stirring his coffee mechanically. He hadn't touched the food he'd ordered. Now you want the stories. What the rules don't explain. James nodded. After the previous night's briefing, he needed context. The rules told you what not to do, but not why. Not what might happen if you failed. Leonard was in his 50s, gray threading through his hair, his face marked with exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. His hands trembled slightly, a common condition among veteran patrolmen, though the official medical reports blamed it on repetitive strain rather than fear. 1997, Leonard began. I was new, cocky, thought the rules were just superstition from paranoid old-timers. I was partnered with a woman named Rita Vasquez, 15-year veteran. She tried to teach me, but I didn't listen. He paused, staring into his coffee as if the memories were reflected there. We were patrolling Tunnel 3, Eastern Route. Rita saw something ahead, a figure standing in the middle of the tracks. She immediately grabbed my arm, told me to stay back. But I was young, stupid. I thought it was a homeless person in danger, someone who needed help. I called out to them. What happened? James asked, though part of him didn't want to know. The figure turned around, but it didn't have a face, Holloway. Where feature should have been was just smoothness, like someone had erased everything that made it human, and it started walking toward us. Not fast, not threatening, just walking, each step making this wet sound, like meat slapping on concrete. Leonard's hands tightened around his coffee cup. Rita pulled me back, following the rules. We backed away, maintaining eye contact, moving toward the nearest exit. But the thing kept coming, kept getting closer. And then, he swallowed hard. Then it spoke, used Rita's voice perfectly, said, Leonard, why are you running? Don't you trust me? What did you do? I almost stopped, almost answered. Rita had to physically drag me away. She saved my life that night, but the thing followed us all the way to the access stairs. We could hear behind us, using different voices. My mother's voice, my dead brother's voice, the girlfriend who'd left me the month before. Every voice perfect, every word designed to make us stop, turn around, engage. Leonard met James's eyes. We made it out, but Rita quit the next day. Took early retirement, moved upstate, never came back to the city. Last I heard, she still has nightmares, still hears those voices. James thought of the voice that had known his name. What was it? The thing you saw? We don't know. We call them blanks, entities that take human shape but can't quite get the details right. They show up in the deeper sections, usually between 2 and 4 a.m. The rules say avoid them, never engage, never respond to their mimicry. Because once you acknowledge them, once you interact, they learn. They get better at being human. A chill ran down James's spine. Have you seen them since? Dozens of times. You learn to recognize them. They move wrong. Too smooth or too jerky, like they're not quite sure how joints work. And their mimicry is tells. The voices are too perfect, too clear. Real voices have flaws, variations. Theirs don't. Leonard finally sipped his coffee, grimacing as if it had gone cold. But they're not the worst things down there. Over the next hour, Leonard shared more encounters, each story building a picture of the subway's hidden ecology, a nightmare ecosystem existing parallel to the familiar trains and stations. He told James about the congregation, a group of figures seen in abandoned platforms, standing in perfect circles, facing inward, completely motionless. Patrolmen who'd gotten too close reported hearing him sung in languages that hurt to listen to. The rule was simple. If you see a congregation, take an alternate route immediately. One patrolman who'd tried to document them with a camera found his photos showed only empty space. But when he developed the film, his darkroom filled with the smell of incense and something burning. He described a repeater, a phenomenon where patrolmen would walk the same stretch of tunnel over and over, their marker number cycling backward, time looping. The only escape was to close your eyes and count backward from 100, walking blindly until you felt the temperature change. 2 men had gotten trapped in a repeater loop for 16 hours, emerging only when their flashlight batteries died, plunging them into darkness that somehow broke the cycle. Then there were the watchers, silhouettes visible only in peripheral vision, standing in maintenance alcoves or pressed against tunnel walls. They never moved when you looked directly at them, but the moment you turn away, they'd be closer. The rules stated to never run from a watcher, as movement triggered pursuit. Instead, you were supposed to back away slowly while reciting your badge number aloud. Nobody knew why this worked, only that it did. The worst encounter I ever had, Leonard said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, was in 2014. I was patrolling alone. Thompson was supposed to be with me, but called in sick. He laughed bitterly at the irony. I was in Tunnel 9, West Branch, when I heard crying. A child crying, echoing from deeper in the passage. James leaned forward. Every instinct said this story would end badly. The rules say never investigate crying, especially children. Whatever makes that sound isn't human, isn't in distress. It's bait. But this time, Leonard's voice cracked. This time it sounded exactly like my daughter. Same age, same cadence. She died 3 years earlier. Leukemia. And hearing her voice again. He stopped, gathering himself. I followed the sound. I know I shouldn't have. I know what the rules say. But it was Emma's voice and I needed to hear it one more time. I went deeper than I'd ever gone. Past red markers. Past sealed doors I had to force open. The crying led me to a chamber that shouldn't exist. Round, maybe 50 feet across, with walls covered in symbols that looked ancient. And in the center, sitting on the ground. What? James prompted gently. Emma, or something wearing her shape. Same pink dress we buried her in. Same blonde hair. But when it looked up at me, its eyes were black. Completely black, like staring into tunnels that went on forever. And it smiled and said, Daddy, why did you let me die? James felt his stomach twist. I ran. I've never run faster in my life. The thing that looked like Emma chased me, but it didn't run. It glided like it wasn't quite touching the ground. And it kept talking, kept asking me questions designed to hurt. Daddy, why didn't you save me? Daddy, don't you love me anymore? Daddy, stay with me down here. It's so lonely in the dark. Leonard's eyes were wet now, reflecting the diner's harsh lights. I barely made it out. Took me 3 hours to find my way back. The tunnels had rearranged themselves somehow, passages leading to places they shouldn't. When I finally emerged, it was dawn, and I'd aged. Not like Thompson, but enough. My hair had gone gray at the temples overnight. And sometimes, even now, when I'm alone in the dark, I hear Emma calling for me. They sat in silence for several minutes, the diner's mundane noises feeling surreal after Leonard's account. Why you still do it? James finally asked. After everything you've seen, why keep going down there? Leonard smiled sadly. Because someone has to. Because the city above has no idea what lives below. And because... He paused, considering. Because once you've been down there long enough, you're part of it. The tunnels mark you, claim you. I could quit tomorrow, move to another city, start over. But I'd still hear them, still feel them watching. At least here, following the rules, I have some control, some understanding. Does it get easier? No. You just get better at living with it. Better at separating what's real from what's not. Better at ignoring voices that know things they shouldn't. Leonard stood, dropping cash on the table. You're scheduled for tonight, right? Southern route. James nodded. Stay in the main passages. Don't deviate. And Holloway. Leonard placed a hand on his shoulder. If you see me down there, and I'm not on the schedule, it's not me. Don't follow it. Don't talk to it. And whatever you do, don't let it touch you. Leonard walked out of the diner, leaving James alone with the weight of stories that couldn't be shared with anyone who hadn't walked those tunnels. He checked his watch. 6 hours until his next shift. 6 hours until he descended again into the city's hidden depths, armed with nothing but rules that might keep him alive and stories that made him question if survival was worth the cost. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. See you tonight, James. He stared at the message, remembering the rule about false names. But it was too late for that now. Whatever existed in those tunnels already knew who he was. The only question was what it wanted. The Special Operations Technical Facility occupied 3 floors beneath the MTA headquarters building, accessible only by biometric scan and security clearance that didn't officially exist. Dr. Rebecca Torres, head of surveillance and anomaly detection, met James in the primary monitoring room, a space filled with screens showing real-time feeds from thousands of cameras throughout the subway system. Director Vaughn said you had questions about our tech, Rebecca said, gesturing to the wall of monitors. She was in her 40s, former MIT professor who joined Special Operations after what she called an incident in the Boston subway system. She refused to elaborate, but James noticed she avoided certain camera angles that showed deeper tunnel sections. I need to understand what we're actually dealing with, James said. The rules help, but they don't explain. How much do we really know? Rebecca pulled up a chair, typed commands into a keyboard. Several monitors switched to different views: infrared, electromagnetic spectrum, motion tracking overlay. More than we did 5 years ago. Less than we need. She pointed to a thermal camera feed showing Tunnel 7. Watch this. Recorded 3 nights ago at 2:34 a.m. The footage showed the tunnel in false color heat signatures. Normal background radiation appeared as cool blues and greens. Then, from the right side of the frame, something moved, but it didn't register on thermal at all. Just a void, a human-shaped absence of temperature. It's not cold, Rebecca explained. It's not hot. It's nothing. Our instruments can't detect it because it doesn't exist in the same way physical matter does. We call these Class A anomalies. They appear in our world, but aren't fully part of it. She pulled up another video, this one from multiple angles simultaneously. This is from last week. Watch the figure in the center. A man walked through the tunnel, clearly visible on standard cameras. But when Rebecca switched to different spectrum views, things changed. In infrared, he had no heat signature. In UV, he appeared as a negative image. And in electromagnetic scanning, he was a void surrounded by distortion fields. That's not a person, James said. Correct. But here's the disturbing part. Rebecca zoomed in on the figure's face. In standard light, it appeared normal. Middle-aged man, construction worker outfit, unremarkable features. But frame by frame, at high resolution, the face changed. Subtle shifts in bone structure, eye spacing, proportions that flickered between different configurations like a television trying to find a signal. It's approximating humanity, Rebecca said. Building a face from memory or observation, but it can't maintain consistency at micro levels. This is probably one of the blanks your colleagues have encountered. James thought of Leonard's story. Can your systems detect them before patrolmen encounter them? That's what we've been trying to develop. Rebecca opened a new program, screens filling with complex algorithms and probability matrices. This is Cassandra, our AI-driven threat detection system. We've trained it on 5 years of anomalous events, thousands of hours of footage, incident reports going back to 1947. It's learning to recognize patterns humans can't see. She ran a simulation. The AI highlighted sections of video James hadn't noticed. Shadows that moved independently of light sources. Reflections in puddles that showed different scenes than what the cameras captured. subtle distortions in the air like heat shimmer in places that should be cold. Cassandra can predict anomalous events about 40 minutes before they occur, Rebecca said. It tracks changes in electromagnetic fields, minor seismic activity, even air pressure variations. These phenomena seem to precede manifestations. Then you can warn patrolmen? In theory. In practice. Rebecca's expression darkened. The system works until it doesn't. About 3 months ago, Cassandra started showing erratic behavior. It would flag safe tunnels as high risk, ignore genuine threats, and sometimes she pulled up a log file. Sometimes it shows us things that haven't happened yet. James leaned closer to the screen. The log entry read, Prediction confidence, 94%. Event type, fatal encounter. Location, Tunnel 7N, Marker 5. Subject, Holloway, J. Timestamp, October 31st, 2025, 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 42 seconds. His blood went cold. That was 2 weeks from now. Cassandra shouldn't be able to predict specific deaths, Rebecca said quietly. It's trained on patterns, not individuals. But ever since we upgraded its deep learning protocols, it's been showing us futures, possibilities. Or maybe, she hesitated. Maybe what's in those tunnels is feeding it information, teaching it. James tore his eyes from the prediction of his own death. You think the anomalies are interfacing with our AI? I think whatever exists down there is far more intelligent than we assumed. We thought we were observing them, studying them. But every camera we place, every sensor we install, every algorithm we run, they're learning from us too. Adapting, becoming more sophisticated. She pulled up security footage from 2020, showing a blank standing motionless in a tunnel, staring directly at a camera. 5 years ago, they ignored our equipment. Didn't seem to notice or care. She fast-forwarded to recent footage. Now watch this. The video showed a different entity in the same location, but this one approached the camera slowly, tilting its head as if examining it. Then it smiled, a too wide expression that seemed deliberately performative, and waved. The gesture was mockingly human, acknowledging awareness not just of the camera, but of whoever was watching. They know we're studying them, Rebecca said, and they're responding, testing our systems. 3 weeks ago, every camera in Tunnel 3 simultaneously showed the same image for exactly 6 seconds. A group of figures standing in a circle, holding hands, looking up at the cameras. All the cameras, perfect synchronization. When we reviewed the footage, our audio analysis picked up something. She played the sound file. At first, just static and the ambient noise of tunnel systems. Then, underneath, barely audible, rhythmic breathing, synchronized, as if the figures were all inhaling and exhaling in perfect unison. And beneath that, something that might have been words spoken backward. Rebecca ran it through a reversal filter. The sound became clearer, resolving into a phrase repeated over and over. We see you too. James felt his skin crawl. Have you told the patrolman about this? Some. The ones with highest clearance. But there's a reason we don't share everything. Rebecca closed the audio file. Information works both ways down there. The more you know, the more they seem to know about you. It's as if knowledge creates a connection, makes you more visible to them. She pulled up another program, this one showing a 3-dimensional map of the entire subway system. Certain sections pulsed with red indicators. These are high-activity zones, places where anomalies concentrate. Notice the pattern. James studied the map. The red zones formed a shape, a geometric design that connected disparate tunnels across Manhattan. It looked almost like a circuit board, or perhaps something older. Ritual markings, symbols from religions that predated modern civilization. The subway system wasn't randomly designed, Rebecca said. Engineers followed geographical features, population centers, existing infrastructure. But the pattern that emerged. She overlaid historical maps showing indigenous settlements, colonial-era structures, geological formations. The high-activity zones align with places that were considered sacred or forbidden long before Europeans arrived. The Lenape people had names for these areas, places where the boundary between worlds was thin. So we built a transportation network on top of supernatural hotspots. We built a network that activated those hotspots, Rebecca corrected. The excavation, the electricity, the constant movement and noise and human presence, all of it created energy flows. We essentially turned Manhattan into a massive conductor for forces we don't understand. She pulled up financial records, requisition forms, incident reports spanning decades. The MTA spends millions annually on what they call infrastructure anomalies. Equipment that fails for no reason. Concrete that cracks in impossible patterns. Electrical systems that malfunction in ways that violate physics. They blame it on age, water damage, poor maintenance. But we know better. James thought about the black film on the older tunnel walls, the way certain passages felt alive. What were we actually protecting the city from? That's the question, isn't it? Rebecca stood, walking to a locked cabinet. She retrieved a hard drive, handling it carefully. This contains footage we don't officially have. Data from the third level, from sealed sections, from places patrolmen aren't supposed to go. What you're about to see is classified at the highest level. Technically, I shouldn't show you, but she glanced at the screen, showing Cassandra's prediction of his death. You need to understand what you're dealing with. She connected the hard drive, entered multiple passwords, submitted to a retinal scan. The screens flickered, then displayed footage so dark James could barely make out details. This is from 1983, Rebecca said. The last expedition to the third level before it was permanently restricted. The team consisted of 6 men, all experienced patrolmen. They had the best equipment available at the time: cameras, lights, radio communication. They descended to map sections that had never been properly documented. The footage showed a tunnel unlike anything James had seen. The walls weren't concrete or brick, but some kind of stone carved with intricate designs. The camera operator's breathing was audible, rapid, nervous. They found chambers, Rebecca narrated. Rooms that shouldn't exist, built long before the subway. Some contained artifacts, pottery, tools, bones arranged in patterns. But in one chamber, they found this. The camera panned across a circular room. In the center stood a pillar of black stone, smooth and featureless, about 8 feet tall. As the light hit it, the surface seemed to ripple like liquid. That's when things went wrong. The audio suddenly filled with screaming. The camera jerked wildly as the operator ran. In the chaotic footage, James caught glimpses of the other team members, of shadows moving with unnatural speed, of the pillar beginning to glow with a light that seemed to absorb brightness rather than emit it. The video cut to static. Only 2 men made it back to the surface, Rebecca said quietly. Both were hospitalized with severe psychological trauma. One never spoke again. The other, before he died 5 years later, kept drawing the same symbol, a design he said he'd seen on the pillar. We've found that symbol in graffiti throughout the deep tunnels, in old records from construction crews in 1904, in historical documents describing indigenous warnings about certain areas. She showed James the symbol, a circle with lines radiating inward, like a black hole consuming light. He'd seen it before, spray-painted on walls during his patrols, scratched into metal, even carved into the concrete near maintenance shafts. Whatever's down there, Rebecca continued, it's been there far longer than the city. The subway didn't create it. We just gave it new pathways, new ways to manifest. Our technology lets us see it, measure it, sometimes even predict it. But we can't control it. Every advance we make, every new surveillance system or detection algorithm, reveals more complexity, more intelligence, more intention. She pulled up one final video, dated just 3 days ago. This is why Vaughn assigned you to meet with me. This is why we're all concerned. The footage showed Tunnel 7, James's usual patrol route. Empty, normal, unremarkable. Then, gradually, symbols appeared on the walls. Not painted, but emerging from within the concrete itself, glowing faintly. They formed sentences, messages in English. James Holloway, we've been waiting. You're almost ready. Come deeper. Bring the others. The messages faded after 60 seconds, leaving no trace. But Cassandra had recorded them, analyzed them, determined they were directed at a specific individual. An individual who hadn't been anywhere near those tunnels when the messages appeared. They're targeting you, Rebecca said. Personally, that's unprecedented. Usually, they're opportunistic, responding to whoever happens to be present. But this, she gestured to the screens. This is deliberate. They want you specifically. They're preparing something. James's mouth was dry. Can your technology stop them? Keep them away from me. Rebecca's expression answered before her words did. Our technology can watch. It can warn. It can document. But stop them. She shook her head. We're dealing with entities that exist partially outside our physical reality. They don't follow rules of matter or energy. Our best equipment can barely detect them, let alone interfere with them. Then what's the point of all this? James gestured at the walls of monitors, the servers, the sophisticated equipment that filled the facility. If we can't stop them, if we can't protect the patrolmen, why keep watching? Because knowledge is the only weapon we have, Rebecca said. The rules we've developed, the protocols that keep patrolmen alive, they came from observation, from pattern recognition, from understanding, even incompletely, what we're dealing with. Every encounter teaches us something. Every piece of footage reveals a new detail. We're building a picture, piece by piece, of an ecosystem that exists beyond human perception. She pulled up a final document, a research proposal marked pending approval. Some of us believe the answer isn't better surveillance or more advanced AI. It's communication. If these entities are intelligent, if they're trying to make contact, maybe we should try to establish dialogue. Not combat, but cooperation. Understanding. That sounds insane. So does everything else about this situation. Rebecca closed the document. But the alternative is continuing as we have been, losing patrolmen, watching good people break under the psychological pressure, maintaining a fragile status quo that could collapse at any moment. The entity that spoke your name, the messages appearing in your patrol route. Maybe that's an attempt at communication. Maybe they're trying to tell us something. Or lure me into a trap. Possibly. Probably. Rebecca met his eyes. But you're scheduled for patrol tonight. You'll go down there again, following the rules, hoping they keep you safe. And maybe they will. Or maybe tonight is the night something changes. Either way, we'll be watching. Every camera, every sensor, every algorithm focused on keeping you alive. It's the best we can do. James stood, his legs feeling unsteady. The weight of information, of possibilities, pressed down on him. What happened to the pillar? The one from the third level. Still down there, sealed behind reinforced doors, under constant surveillance. Cassandra monitors it continuously. Rebecca paused. 3 days ago, for the first time since 1983, it activated, started glowing, emitting energy we can't classify. The activation lasted 17 minutes. And during those 17 minutes, every anomaly in the system became more active, more visible, more aggressive. What triggered it? Rebecca looked uncomfortable. We don't know for certain, but the activation began at 8:47 p.m. on the 15th. Do you remember where you were at that time? James thought back. October 15th, evening. He'd been in Tunnel 7, approaching Marker 7 at 5, the junction with the restricted passage. The moment before he'd seen the flickering light. I was near the red-marked tunnel, he said quietly. We know. Your GPS tracker showed it. And Cassandra recorded a correlation. The moment you approached that junction, the pillar responded. As if it recognized you. As if your presence activated something. James felt dizzy. I'm connected to it somehow. We don't know. But whatever's down there, it's focused on you now. The messages, the targeting, even Thompson's death. He was your scheduled partner. Everything points to a pattern. You're part of something larger, James. Something that started long before you joined Special Operations. She walked him to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. Tonight, when you patrol, trust the rules. Trust your instincts. But also, pay attention. If they're trying to communicate, maybe we need to listen. Maybe that's the only way forward. James left the facility and emerged into the afternoon sunlight of Manhattan. The normal world going about its business above the tunnels where impossible things waited. He had 4 hours before his shift. 4 hours to decide if he was brave enough or foolish enough to keep descending into the dark. His phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. The technology can't save you, but we can. Come willingly, and we'll show you why you're special. He stared at the message, Rebecca's words echoing in his mind. Communication or trap, understanding or destruction. At 10 p.m., James would find out. The recruitment orientation room at Special Operations Headquarters could have belonged to any corporate office. Ergonomic chairs, a projector screen, motivational posters about safety and teamwork. But the 23 candidates sitting in neat rows knew this wasn't a normal job interview. They'd all signed extensive non-disclosure agreements. They'd all undergone psychological evaluations. And they'd all been briefed, vaguely, about unusual working conditions in restricted areas. James stood at the back of the room, watching Director Vaughn deliver the official presentation. She showed slides about infrastructure maintenance, emergency protocols, shift schedules. Everything sanitized, normal, safe. The real orientation, the rules, the stories, the truth would come later, after most of these candidates had failed the final screening. Why do you stay? The question came from beside him. Dr. Rebecca Torres had entered quietly, holding a tablet displaying real-time feeds from the tunnel system. After everything you've learned, after the targeting, after seeing what happened to Thompson, why not quit? James had asked himself the same question hundreds of times since that night 2 weeks ago. The night he descended for what Cassandra predicted would be his final patrol. Because I went back, he said simply. That night, October 31st at 3:17 a.m., James had stood at marker 7-5 at the junction with a restricted tunnel where light flickered and voices called his name. Cassandra's prediction played in his mind. Fatal encounter. This location, this exact time, he'd had a choice. Follow the rules, avoid the tunnel, maintain the status quo, or step forward into the unknown, accept whatever communication or trap awaited him. He'd chosen a third option. Standing at the threshold, James had spoken aloud to the darkness. I know you're there. I know you've been trying to reach me, but I'm not coming deeper. If you want to communicate, do it here, on neutral ground. Show me I can trust you. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the flickering light stabilized, resolved into something impossible. A projection hanging in the air. Images cycling through scenes that James somehow understood were memories. Not his memories. Theirs. He saw the island before buildings, before colonization, when the Lenape people lived in careful balance with the land and what existed beneath it. He saw them performing ceremonies at specific sites, maintaining boundaries, honoring agreements with entities that dwelled in the deep places. He saw European settlers arriving, dismissing indigenous warnings, building on sacred ground. He saw the first excavation for the subway, workers breaking through barriers that had held for generations, releasing things that had been contained. He saw the pillar in the third level, not a monument but a seal, placed there by people who understood what needed to remain separated. He saw construction crews damaging it, weakening it, creating cracks through which influence could seep. And he saw the present, a city built on top of a supernatural ecosystem now destabilized, with entities trying desperately to communicate warnings that no one would hear because humans have forgotten how to listen. The images faded. A voice spoke, not threatening but urgent. "We were guardians once like you. We protected the boundaries. But when your people broke the seals, we became trapped, neither fully in your world nor our own. The deep places grow unstable. If the pillar fails completely, what we've held back for centuries will emerge. Your city will fall, not from our doing, but from what lies beyond us, in levels deeper than you've imagined." James had stood trembling, processing the implications. "What do you want from me?" "The same thing your directors want. The same thing the old tribes wanted. Balance. Maintenance. Understanding. You must strengthen the seals before they break entirely. But your people fear us too much to work with us. They see us as threats when we're trying to help. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't manipulation?" The voice had paused, considering. "You don't. But Cassandra predicted you would die tonight. You're still alive. We changed that future. We show the AI the timeline where you live, where you help, where together we prevent catastrophe. Your technology saw the truth. Ask your Dr. Torres." The presence had faded then, the tunnel returning to normal darkness. James had completed his patrol, returned to the surface, and immediately contacted Rebecca. She'd reviewed Cassandra's logs, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock. "It's true. About 40 minutes before your scheduled encounter, Cassandra updated its prediction. The fatal encounter probability dropped to 0. But the system also logged something else, data input from an external source. Information that shouldn't be possible. Warnings about structural integrity in the 3rd level, about energy buildup around the pillar, about projected timeline until complete seal failure." She'd pulled up calculations. "According to this data, we have approximately 8 months before the containment fails entirely. 8 months to either strengthen the seals or evacuate Manhattan." Now, 2 weeks later, Special Operations had entered a new phase. The recruits in the orientation room represented a different kind of patrolman. Not just guards following rules, but specialists trained in what Vaughn called entity relations. People who could maintain the balance, work with the entities rather than just avoiding them, repair the damage done by a century of ignorant expansion. "The future of the Underground Watch isn't just surveillance," Rebecca said, showing James a proposal document on her tablet. "It's cooperation. We're developing new protocols based on what you learned. Communication channels with the entities, joint monitoring of the seal structures, shared early warning systems for deeper threats." "Does the city government know?" "Some do. The ones who need to. There's a task force being formed. Engineers, historians, specialists in indigenous knowledge, even parapsychologists. We're trying to understand what the original Guardians knew, how they maintained balance for centuries before we disrupted it." Vaughn concluded her presentation, dismissed the candidates for their first round of practical assessments. She approached James and Rebecca, her expression showing the weight she'd carried for decades. 37 years I've run this department," Vaughn said. 37 years of containing threats, following rules, losing good people to things we couldn't fight or understand. And now you're telling me we've been doing it wrong the whole time." "Not wrong," James said, "just incomplete. The rules kept us alive, maintained a fragile truce. But truces aren't permanent. Things change. The entities adapted. Now we need to adapt too." Vaughn looked at the candidates, filtering out of the room, young faces unaware of what they were really signing up for. How many of them will survive training once they know the truth? "More than before," Rebecca said, "because we're not just teaching them to avoid and survive anymore. We're teaching them to understand and cooperate. That changes everything." Over the following months, the program evolved. Patrolmen underwent new training that included history, anthropology, pattern recognition beyond what technology could provide. They learned to distinguish between entity types, to recognize genuine threats versus attempts at communication, to maintain their humanity while acknowledging the inhuman intelligence they worked alongside. James became a trainer, sharing his experience, teaching new recruits how to navigate the line between caution and cooperation. Leonard Shun, despite his trauma, agreed to consult, his decades of encounters providing valuable insights into entity behavior and psychology. The technical division expanded, with Cassandra being reprogrammed, not just to predict threats, but to facilitate communication. The AI became a translation layer, helping humans and entities exchange information despite their fundamentally different modes of existence. Most significantly, expeditions to the third level resumed, carefully planned, with entity cooperation, focused on assessing and reinforcing the seals. What they found confirmed the entity's warnings. The pillar showed extensive damage, cracks spreading through its structure, energy readings indicating imminent failure. But they also found something else. Maps carved into the walls of deep chambers, showing a network of seals throughout the city, all connected, all interdependent. The subway system, inadvertently, had been built along these lines of power. What humanity had meant as transportation infrastructure had become a circuit board for forces older than civilization. If we can repair all the seals simultaneously, Rebecca explained during a strategy meeting, we don't just prevent catastrophe. We actually stabilize the entire system, make it stronger than it was before. The entities are offering to help. They have knowledge, abilities we don't. But they need our physical presence, our hands, our technology. It has to be a partnership. The work began in earnest. Teams descended to levels few humans had ever reached, guided by entities who materialized to show them the way. What once would have been pursued as threats now served as consultants, pointing out stress fractures in reality that human instruments couldn't detect, teaching ancient techniques for reinforcing boundaries between worlds. It wasn't easy. Some entities remained hostile, defending territories they'd claimed during the century of chaos. Some humans couldn't overcome their fear, couldn't work alongside beings that violated every rule of physics and logic. There were setbacks, injuries, moments when the whole project seemed doomed. But gradually, seal by seal, tunnel by tunnel, the balance began to restore. James stood in the chamber of the pillar 6 months after his encounter at Marker 7 and 5, watching a team of engineers and entities work together to repair the ancient structure. The entities manifested more clearly here, their forms still not quite human, but less unsettling, as if cooperation made them more comprehensible to human perception. One approached him, the same presence that had spoken that night, now taking a form James's mind interpreted as an older man with features that shifted subtly, never quite settling. "You took a risk, trusting us," the entity said. "You took a risk too, revealing the truth. Either of us could have been wrong." The old tribes understood this. Coexistence requires mutual vulnerability. Trust is always a risk, but isolation is certain death. The entity gestured at the pillar, now reinforced with both modern materials and something else. Energy woven through the structure in patterns that existed half in physical reality and half in whatever dimension the entities inhabited. When this is complete, the city will be safe. For now, but the work never ends. New threats will emerge. New generations will forget and need to remember again. Then we'll teach them, James said. Make this knowledge permanent. No more secrets. No more pretending the underground is empty. It's time humanity acknowledges we're not alone, even in our own cities. The entity's form flickered, showing something that might have been a smile. "You've changed, James Holloway. When we first spoke your name, you were terrified. Now you speak of permanent partnerships. I learned. That's what humans do when we let ourselves. We adapt, as do we. This cooperation changes us too. Makes us more present, more real in your world. We don't know where this leads, but it's better than what we had before. Fear and isolation and boundaries that were always temporary." Over the following weeks, the seal repairs completed. The pillar stabilized, its glow settling into a steady rhythm rather than the erratic pulsing that had indicated imminent failure. Similar work progressed at sites throughout the system, creating a network of renewed boundaries that allowed coexistence rather than enforcing separation. Special operations transformed from secret organization, fighting unknown threats, into something closer to a diplomatic service. Maintaining relationships, facilitating communication, managing the inevitable tensions that arose when two forms of existence shared the same space. The rules remained, but evolved. New entries appeared in the leather-bound notebook. Rule 88. If an entity approaches with hands extended, palms up, they seek parley. Respond in kind if conditions are safe. Rule 89. The symbols carved in deep chambers are not threats, but communications. Learn to read them. They contain warnings and wisdom. Rule 90. You are not alone in the darkness. Others watch over these spaces. Some are threats. Some are allies. Learn the difference. James stood on the platform of 42nd Street Station 1 year after his first encounter, watching the last train depart into the tunnels. The fear that had once accompanied this moment had transformed into something else. Not comfort exactly, but understanding. The tunnels were dangerous, yes, strange and unsettling and full of things that defied human comprehension. But they were also protected, maintained by partnerships between worlds. His radio crackled. Holloway, ready for patrol? Copy that. Descending now. As he walked down the maintenance stairwell into the deep tunnels, past the markers he knew by heart, James thought about the recruits in training, learning the new protocols. He thought about Leonard Chun, finally sleeping through nights without nightmares, finding peace and understanding rather than just survival. He thought about Rebecca Torres and her team, still analyzing, still learning, but no longer studying entities as mere phenomena. Now they were interviewing them, collaborating, building knowledge together. And he thought about Thompson, whose death had seemed senseless at the time, but had ultimately pushed everyone toward change. Maybe Thompson had died trying to quit, trying to escape, or maybe he died trying to bridge the gap, attempting communication without the tools or knowledge to do it safely. Either way, his sacrifice hadn't been meaningless. At marker 7, in 5, James paused at the junction where everything had changed. The restricted tunnel no longer seemed quite so forbidden. He'd walked it dozens of times since, accompanied by entities, learning its secrets, understanding its purpose. A figure materialized in the passage, one of the regular guardians, an entity that had claimed this sector centuries ago and now worked with human patrolmen to maintain it. Quiet tonight, the entity said, its voice clearer than before, more human in cadence. Quiet is good, James replied. Means the seals are holding. For now. Always for now. Balance requires constant maintenance. Then we'll maintain it. Together. The entity faded back into the darkness, continuing its own patrol through dimensions James could barely perceive. Above, 8 million people slept, or worked, or lived their lives, never knowing about the partnerships that kept the foundations of their city stable. That was fine. They didn't need to know the details. They just needed to be safe. James continued his patrol, following the markers deeper into the tunnel system, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. Behind him, in front of him, all around him in spaces he couldn't fully see, others walked their own patrols. Human and not human, mortal and eternal, all of them guardians of the deep places, maintaining boundaries that allowed two worlds to coexist. The subway rumbled in the distance, trains carrying passengers through tunnels that were never truly empty. The city breathed and lived and grew, built on foundations older and stranger than anyone imagined. And in the deepest darkness, the seals held strong, keeping back things even the entities feared, maintained by partnerships forged for necessity and preserved by understanding. James smiled slightly, reaching for his radio to report another successful checkpoint. The rules had kept him alive long enough to learn the truth. Now the truth would keep everyone safe. It was a fragile hope, a tentative peace, a partnership built on mutual risk. But it was enough. For now, it was enough.